This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
In Chapter 9, we look at the purpose and process of management. And then very closely allied to that, in Chapter 10, we're going to look at leadership. So what is meant by management? And a couple of definitions in here. Rosemary Stewart suggested management is getting things done through other people. So the manager and the team, and it is for the manager to allocate tasks to people to make sure that people carry out those tasks and perhaps even to motivate and to inspire those people. Remember, all the way back to the start of the lectures, we had the definition of an organization, and very important in that definition, there was the idea that an organization is a social arrangement. In other words, you're dealing with people with feelings, their own aspirations, their own preferences, their own likes and dislikes, and so on. I think you'll see that sometimes the early theories in management left out the social aspect, and it wasn't until about 1935 or so that real work and understanding began to be done on the importance of this social aspect that should be part of management. Anyway, the earliest theories of management are known as classical management theories. Here the word classical suggests that there is a correct way of doing things, so that in a classical piece of music, a classical symphony, there were laid down ways in which the piece of work would progress and so on. In classical Greek architecture, there is a suggestion that a certain proportion in front of the temple, for example, was pleasing to the eye, and if you did something in a different way, it was non-classical, they would effectively say it was incorrect. So these early theories of management were very prescriptive. They say, this is it, and there is only the one way of managing, and if you don't do it like this, you're doing it incorrectly. And that's something which later theories let go of. And one of the earliest theories was Henri Fayol, and he came up with what he said were the 5 functions of managers. And these 5 functions of managers were, first of all, managers should plan. They should be thinking what we're going to be doing next month, etc. They should be organizing their people, organizing people into maybe functions, into teams, and so on. Telling people what to get done when, and so on. Commanding is part of that. Coordinating, so if you're making 500 units, make sure you can distribute 500 units, and so on. And controlling, if you tell people to make 500 units and they only make 400 units, then there's some sort of investigation has to be done, and that would be part of the controlling of performance. To some extent, no one would argue with any of these, but maybe knowing them doesn't help you be a manager. I don't think anyone kind of says, right, it's 10 o'clock now, time for a bit of organizing, and then it's 11 o'clock, I better go on to the coordinating and so on. I think knowing these will not help a poor manager necessarily be a good manager. Also, particularly noteworthy because of its absence, there is nothing in here, for example, about motivating, about inspiring employees and so on, of getting them to want to do better. You can command them and so on, tell them to do better and so on. You can upbraid them, you can kind of punish them in some way if they don't do better or don't hit production targets and so on. But it's a very kind of I'm the manager, you're the staff, you do what I say kind of thing. And this is not perhaps surprising, because really until, I suppose, about the middle of the 1800s, there weren't very many large organizations around. Most businesses were fairly small then. And when businesses began to grow, the only large organizations around that they could draw perhaps inspiration from was essentially military organizations. And the military organizations were very much, I'm the officer, you're the man, you do what I say kind of thing. Don't ask any questions, just kind of get on with it. And the early theories followed this very kind of dictatorial or kind of autocratic approach to management. Around the same sort of time, Frederick Taylor invented or came up with this theory of scientific management. And believe it or not, it was kind of not realized at the time that a function of managers is maybe to work out how best to do things and instruct their staff that this is the way to do it. Again, if you kind of go back before large organizations were invented, most working people, for example, were individual tradespeople. You'd have a blacksmith, you'd have maybe a weaver. They were essentially working on their own, and they knew what they were doing. They had a skill, and managers didn't think that I should be telling them how to do their job. But Taylor had this idea that it was a purpose of management to discover the best way for people to do their work, and that this is a scientific approach, an experimental approach. And the story is told that one of his experiments dealt with people. There was apparently a profession way back then who were called shovelers. And a shovel is a thing like that you would move, say, snow with, or coal, or soil, or something of that sort. And essentially manual labor. There weren't very many machines around, and there was a kind of a group of people who made their living, if you like, out of manual labor like this. And Taylor did experiments to say what is the most efficient weight to shift, to put on the end of your shovel. So you get a good compromise between moving a reasonable amount and not becoming tired very quickly, or not maybe doing yourself an injury of some sort. And let's say that he came up with the idea that 10 kilograms was the ideal weight to put on a shovel, so you could work all day, reasonable pace, and this would maximize the amount of material that you could move. And then he realized that, okay, if you want to get 10 kilograms onto a shovel, and you were moving, for example, soil, then 10 kilograms of soil would occupy a certain volume, if you like. But if you were perhaps moving wheat, that would be a different volume. If you were moving coal, that would be a different size, if you like, really. And he said what you should do is you should have kind of shovels of, if you like, different sizes, depending on what you were moving, but they would be suited to that, so that whatever you put on that, you should choose the right shovel, it would always be about 10 kilograms of it. And he says, for example, managers should make sure that they equip their staff correctly and instruct them, use the right implement for the job, do it like this, and that's going to be more efficient. So there was a science of work, find out by experiment what's going to work, apply it to job design, tell people this is a way to do it, and that this will increase your productivity and will increase workers' wages. And there should be this kind of cooperation, if you like, interchange between managers and their workers. Now, the benefits that came from this were as follows. There was an increase in productivity. The wages were, again, almost scientifically computed, so that depending on your output, you get more wages. So there's kind of productivity linked to your reward in there. Part of it was also that you should take care of your workforce, that if you injure them or tire them out and so on. It's not going to be good for the company and so on. But unfortunately, his kind of scientific approach to management, saying what is the most efficient way of doing things, was really the beginnings of, I suppose you'd call it, the classical production line, where you have a row of people standing along the production line. They stand there, the products kind of come along in front of them on a conveyor belt, and they just sit there all day doing the same thing over and over again. Because this was scientifically found to be the most efficient way of making goods. But of course, sitting there day after day doing exactly the same task dehumanizes work. And towards the end of his career and after his death, Taylor was vilified as someone who was certainly not the worker's friend. He was the person who condemned workers to this very, very kind of repetitive and kind of non-rewarding, might be financially rewarding, but not in any other way, this kind of robotic type of approach. But he didn't start out that way. His whole ambition was, I want to be able to pay my workers more. I want them to be able to earn more. And by these scientific approaches to management, I will enable them to earn more. So, but again, it was very much managers telling workers how to do it. Around 1935, a very famous set of experiments was done by a researcher called Elton Mayo. And these are called the Hawthorne studies because they were named after a General Electric plant in America called the Hawthorne plant. And Mayo was called in by the managers of this plant because they were, anyway, slightly motivated, slightly confused by what people were doing, and they wanted some research to be done. And the first thing Mayo did as part of his experiments was he divided the workforce into two, and they were doing very kind of intricate wiring work and making coils and so on, very intensively manual. Divided the workforce into two, and with one group he kept the lighting constant, and with the second group he varied the lighting up and down, and varied the type of lighting and so on. And he would go back and ask people, is this better, what sort of lighting do you prefer? And this is the first time, in many ways, that workers were asked for their opinion. And to his surprise, he discovered that really, whether you put the lighting up or down with this experimental group, their productivity always improved. And he said, okay, why is that? I don't really expect the productivity to improve if I make the lights dimmer, but it did. And his conclusion was that why people's productivity increased was that this group where you're varying the lighting and you went along and asked them what sort of lighting they preferred, asked them for their views, that was motivating. They enjoyed being asked their opinion. They enjoyed, in a way, being valued by managers because they felt special. And because they felt special, they worked harder. So this was the beginning of what became then the Human Relations School, that it brought in this idea, this social idea, that you're not dealing with robots who can do the same thing over and over again perfectly happily. You're dealing with people who like to be talked to, like to be involved, like to feel they've got some influence over their lives and their workplace and so on. His second kind of experiment, he'd been brought in, was that management wanted to link productivity to a pay deal. So they're going to offer people more money for more output. And they went ahead with this scheme, and they were surprised when nobody took it up. And again, Mayo looked into this. Why is nobody responding to the opportunity for extra pay? And he discovered the existence of what are called informal groups. So you're working with, let's say, a group of colleagues in one area of the factory, let's say 10 of you all together, management come along with this scheme here. Let's say you're producing 45 units a day at the moment. Management wants you to go up to 50 units a day. And you kind of discuss amongst yourselves, are we going to go up to 50 units a day? Do I really want to work harder than that? Do I want to let management know that more productivity is actually possible? And if the group kind of as a whole decided, no, we'll stick with 45, it was going to be very difficult indeed to get one person to break ranks and go up to 50. You can imagine the kind of disapproval that would be brought upon you by your colleagues. There was great what's called peer pressure. And this was a discovery that these informal groups, it just happened to be 10 people working close to each other, 10 people talking to each other, 10 people are friends. It was not part of the formal structure of the organization. And again, you remember the iceberg, the formal organization, and then the huge informal organization. Groups of friends, and management kind of weren't almost aware that they would be cooperating with each other, formed very strong what are called group norms. And woe betide anyone who broke the group norms. And he discovered it was actually quite sophisticated. If one of the members of the group had a child who was ill, and of course in America, certainly then, they would have to pay for medical care and so on, and this person needed a bit of overtime, then they would be given some leeway, if you like, to earn a bit more overtime. But then they had to kind of come back and do the same as everybody else did once that emergency was over. So from the human relations school, we have the idea that participation, treating people as individuals is going to be quite motivating, quite important. And as I say, this discovery of group norms, which we have, very important informal part of the organization, and was almost the first time that this informal organization had been formally recognized. Mintzberg is a more modern writer. You need to know really the phrases here. There's a lot of management theory, a lot of leadership theory, almost more theories than you need, but you need to know the words here because this is the sort of area where multiple choice questions can come up. Mintzberg, rather, I suppose, almost going back to Fayol, identified three managerial functions, said interpersonal roles. This is where you have your formal authority and status and so on. You can be acting here as a figurehead, you'll be leading people, you might be inspiring people, because again we have this word leading here, that wasn't in Fayol's here. So this is post-human relations school. There is the idea here of inspiring people, if you like. So you're dealing with your staff on a day-to-day basis and liaising with them, a bit of coordination and so on going on within that. There is information processing. So, for example, you will be receiving the monthly management accounts. You'll be thinking whether the productivity is as it should be or not. You will be making announcements maybe to your staff. You'll be bringing somebody in and having a chat to them, so telling them we've got this new contract, we need to try and organize work for that and so on. And then finally a decisional role, deciding maybe where we have to spend money on new equipment, deciding maybe what price to charge to a new customer and so on. And here, for example, that was resource allocator, where to spend the money, negotiating both internally and externally with other parties. Disturbance handler, this is where you have conflicts within the organization. Two people both want a new piece of machinery, only one can get it. One person is complaining that somebody else's work is inferior, and there's a bit of a bad feeling going on in there. and part of managerial work is to deal with that. And then improver, changer, making decisions which improve productivity, improve output, and gradually, over time, keep the organization working well. Finally, in this chapter, we just look at 4 definitions which we would be putting in here. And these definitions are power, authority, responsibility, and delegation. Power, and again you have to know these. So power is the ability to influence people or events. Power, this ability to influence people or events doesn't mean that you should do it. And you can have managers or leaders, I suppose, who use power in a disruptive way. The sources of power which you can have, there is rational legal power. Rational legal power is the power that a manager has simply because they're called manager. There is a legal requirement, really, or part of your implied contract of employment, that you do what the person called manager tells you to do. A second source of power can be coercive power. Hopefully we don't find that too much in ordinary businesses, but this is a use of force, really. And in some situations, perhaps a kind of policing or military situation, there is undoubtedly coercive power around the place. There is reward power. Reward power is where you hold up the promise of a reward, maybe more money, a pay rise, maybe a promotion, and you say, if you do this, then I'm going to pay you a little bit more, or you get a good review, or you're going to get a promotion, and so on. There is knowledge power. This is often the power that's wielded by experts, and knowledge power is saying, I know this, and you don't know this, and I will exercise power by, maybe I'll tell you how to do it, maybe I won't tell you how to do it, you know? So you could imagine someone who is going to fix your computer or get you connected to the internet and so on. They have a bit of a source of power, because every time you get stuck, they have to come and kind of help you. And maybe they'll be reluctant to tell you how to fix it yourself, so you can keep this power. And finally, there is charismatic power. Charismatic power comes from the charm of individuals, and the charm of individuals, the force of character there, that you would almost follow them across hot coals. It's not because they're your manager necessarily, but it's just something about their personality, which is very magnetic. And this is quite often where you get your very strong chief executive officer, a dominant chief executive officer, sometimes because of the exercise of charismatic power, and people follow them very often where they shouldn't follow them. Finally, on this, we'll just go back to one other writer, Drucker. Drucker said that managers had 3 functions: as managing a business, managing other managers, managing the workers and the work. And he broke that down into a further 5 categories like this: setting objectives for people, giving them a budgeted output, organizing the group, motivating and communicating with people. And again, notice that we must be post-human relations school here, really. We have motivating in here. Motivating is very much a kind of social aspect here, measuring performance and developing people. So again, I think you have to, there's no easy way to do it. You have to know that Mintzberg was having his interpersonal roles, his informational processing roles, his decisional roles. Drucker, 3 sorts of management, the business, the managers and the workers and so on. And you probably need to know that these 5 elements of Drucker's idea of what managers do: setting objectives, organizing the group, motivating and communicating, measuring performance, and developing people. I suppose we could also emphasize in here that developing people is one of these social aspects, one of these human relation aspects here. There was nothing way back in Fayol about motivating, nothing way back in Fayol about developing people whatsoever.